The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
Because I think that it is an incredibly valid form of art criticism to stand in front of a piece of art and say, I like this one.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. I first knew Russ Ramsey as a bitter rival in an American Idol fantasy league. We have since made up. Russ is a pastor in the Nashville area, a masterful storyteller, and my go-to resource for all art-related questions. His love of art and story come together in his new book, Rembrandt is in the Wind, Learning to Love Art Through the Eyes of Faith. It's an art history book, but more importantly, it's a book about the beauty that comes out of stories of human brokenness. Beauty matters. Nobody makes that case better than Russ Ramsey. Russ Ramsey, I'm so excited that you're on the Habit Podcast. I've been waiting for this book for a long time. Rembrandt is in the Wind.
Man, it is good to be with you. Yeah, we've been talking about the things that are in this book, you and I, for it's been years.
I'm trying to think what the first of these. So this book tells it's a long stories really about 9 painters.
Yep.
Is it fair to say 9 works of art, or is it just? Well, would you say 9?
It's 9 long form stories about artists or particular works of art or particular groups of artists and the work that they made together. So some of them really do feature primarily on a particular work. Like there's a chapter on Michelangelo's David that really is just kind of laser focused, and one on the only painting Van Gogh ever sold while he was alive. But then there's another one that's kind of about the birth of Impressionism and the community around that. So they and then a couple of them are really kind of more biographical about particular artists like Edward Hopper or Henry Tanner or Lilias Trotter. But each chapter is a kind of a standalone story.
Yeah. So the first of these essays, I've read most of them, and I've heard you give talks on most of them. But the first one I heard was actually the title essay, Rembrandt is in the Wind. And it's a fascinating story about the Rembrandt being stolen from the Gardner Museum? Is that what it's?
Yeah, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. In 1990. So it's been, and none of those paintings, 13 works were stolen. worth $500 million. It's the single largest property theft in American history. And they were taken one night, and nobody has heard or seen them since.
Yeah.
Like Netflix did a special on it that you can watch. I think it's called This Is a Robbery. And then there was also a big podcast that was all about it. And they were kind of delightfully dissatisfying because it's a whodunit with no answer, right?
Yeah.
So, but my chapter focuses more like on the story of the storm on the Sea of Galilee that the painting represents, and kind of the theological conundrum of, we live in a world where works like this, with the subject matter they're about, Jesus' disciples pleading with him, "Don't you care that we're perishing here?" Was cut out of its frame with a razor blade and rolled up and driven off into the night. I mean, it's a compelling story that's kind of like, that is a version, that heist was a kind of a version of the kind of storms we find ourselves in a world that's kind of profoundly broken, where that kind of thing happens. So that was the first one that I wrote. And for the book, I actually just wrote it kind of as an essay to give as a talk. But then it got me just spinning on, there's got to be just so many stories to explore and uncover. And it was a blast to just get into things.
It's you've written about so many different things throughout your career, in the last 10 or however many years we've known each other. And it's been really fun for me to see you settling into, like, when I first knew you, the idea that you'd be the guy, the art history guy, that was not, I mean, I did know that you were interested in art, but the thought that you would settle into this thing, that now this is such an important part of what you do, including on social media. You do these Art Wednesday things that are, I think, are just so fantastic. I guess that's not a question. You got anything to say about this idea?
Yeah, there's a cohesive. So I've written 3 books that are narrative retellings of the story of Scripture, and another that's a memoir. And I think what all 5 books then have in common, including this one, is their storytelling. That there's a fascination with the slow unpacking of a story, and the way that they shed so much light on the human experience, And so it's funny, like, as I was doing a lot of the work for the Rembrandt is in the Wind, it occurred to me, I'm doing, I'm a pastor full time. And so I write a sermon every week and preach it. And I realized I'm kind of just doing exegesis here, but I'm exegeting a painting. It's the same, it's a very similar process. Like, I'm researching and reading and taking notes and trying to connect dots and trying to understand. And I found that for the Rembrandt is in the Wind book, it was a lot of the same kind of muscle that I was using to write the narrative retellings of Scripture, where I'm like, okay, here's the data. Here are things people wrote about it, and how can I weave these things together? So that's what they have in common, is kind of the storyteller's voice. But I think since I was a kid and in school, art was always one of the most compelling things to me. I was fascinated by it, and with the advent of the technology that's at our fingertips now, it's so much easier to research and to dig deep quickly without having to find special libraries that house the books that are related to all these things.
So talk to me about why. This is an art history book for lay people.
Yes,
is that fair to say?
It is. Well,
why do lay people need art history?
Well, I think that art, like, if I just were to say to somebody, "Hey, I've written a book about art," most people who are who are not super into art are going to have a pretty similar initial response. And that is perhaps a feeling that it's not a book for them.
Yeah.
Because it's a subject matter that can feel intimidating, or like I have to have an art history degree in order to be able to understand it. And it's also the experience that so many of us have had where somebody has shown us a piece of work, or we've stood in front of a piece of art and just not had we just don't get it.
Yeah.
There's certain artists out there that hang in, the Louvre and the Met, and people stand in front of them and say, what is this? Like, it's just a bunch of color fields. Like, why is this in a world-class museum? And so I think there are a lot of obstacles to people engaging with art because we feel like we have to engage as an art critic. And so for me, I was wanting to write something in a way that would say, you don't have to be an art historian or an art critic to really engage with art. And it's funny because I think that it is an incredibly valid form of art criticism to stand in front of a piece of art and say, I like this one. Just as much as it's a very valid form of art criticism to stand in front of a work and say, I don't like this one, or I don't get this one. I think as Westerners, we kind of feel like we're supposed to be able to walk up to something and absorb it and get it immediately.
And translate that into abstract nouns.
Right. Yeah.
This is about human suffering, and this is about whatever.
Exactly. So I had an art teacher in high school who told us young art students, she said, if you want to be an appreciator of art for the rest of your life, here's how you do it. Find an artist that you resonate with, and then just pay attention to them for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. Get a book or two about them, get a coffee table book. When you're at a museum and their work is there, go look at it and read the plaque on the wall. And over time, you will not only develop a deeper familiarity and understanding of that particular artist, which is really a lot of the key to taking in art, is understanding some of the artist himself or herself, right? Is that she said, but not only will you start to develop a kind of an insight and maybe even an expertise on that particular artist, but that artist will introduce you to their friends, and they'll introduce you to their mentors, so you'll walk over to the Van Gogh and you'll pass Gauguin and Pissarro and Monet and Manet, and maybe one of those artists will catch your eye, Mary Cassatt, and you'll stop and you'll say, oh, what's this? I like this. And before you know it, you're walking into, you came to see Van Gogh, but it was like a little party, and you got to hang out with a bunch of people. And then they'll tell you, yeah, Rembrandt was kind of our big inspiration. So you'll wander over to him and you'll see Rembrandt, and he'll introduce you to Caravaggio and Vermeer, and you'll learn about, the chiaroscuro light and dark extremes that makes their work so like dramatic. And before you just do this over the course of your life, and you start to just develop a general familiarity with art itself. And you don't have to go to college for it. Like, and you also don't have to feel that incredible burden we might feel when we walk into a museum that we've got to take the whole thing in a day. It's just, so part of what I was wanting to do with the book is write something for people as an invitation to enjoy art and to be intrigued by art and to want to know how to dig deeper into the stories of artists' lives and works that exist. Because to me, I think it's very intriguing to me if there's a particular work of art that has been regarded for 500 years as one of the greatest things ever produced by a human being. I think that fact alone makes me want to say, then I want to understand more about Michelangelo's David. If this is the way it is regarded, and it has been for half a millennia, there's something worth my time there to seek to understand. So
Was Van Gogh your artist that you started with?
He was. Yeah, he was my gateway. He was the one, and I had he was my art teacher's favorite. She loved Van Gogh and Georgia O'Keeffe and Frank Lloyd Wright. Those were her three. And we were in Indiana, where we were 2 hours away from Chicago. And so we'd go to the Chicago Art Institute. And in Chicago, there's a Frank Lloyd Wright house, and so we would take this field trip. I must have done it 3 times as an art student, where we'd go there and, we'd see O'Keeffe and we'd see Van Gogh and we'd see some Edward Hopper and we'd see Seurat's Dots, we called it, the Saturday afternoon in the park or whatever it's called. And we go to a Frank Lloyd Wright house, and those became sort of pillars for me of like, okay, these are points on the map for me artistically of understanding. Yeah, but Van Gogh he was the key. He was the way in.
Yeah. So I want to hear you talk about, a minute ago you said you don't have to be approach art as an art critic. In that to stand before a painting and say, I like this one, or even I don't like this one, is an okay, form of art criticism. I think maybe I think that's the way you put it. Tell me about that. Like, what does it mean when you say approaching art as an art critic? What do you mean?
Well, I mean like the art critic, the caricature of the art critic that people have in their minds, that they understand all of the history and they're just kind of this fluent fountain of all of these French names and words and movements. And, they call the Paris Salon the Salon, and, things like that, where there's kind of this sort of insider, inner ring kind of thing. And I love being around art historians because they're usually never the cartoon, right? But I think in our minds, it's the Anton Ego in Ratatouille, is kind of the art critic. He's the food critic, there. Yeah. I think we can feel like because we don't know much about art history or art criticism, we're not qualified to really engage with art in any kind of a valid way. And so we'll self-deprecate and we'll say, I saw paintings, but I had no idea what I was looking at. I think, well, no, you do. Yeah. I had a funny experience with a coworker a number of years ago who loves Mark Rothko. And Mark Rothko is, if you're not familiar with him, it's a lot of color fields, rectangles. And I'd seen some Rothko online and read some things, there were some articles that were coming out about him at a particular time. And I was a person who said, I just don't get it. I don't get that. And she said, okay. And we were talking about it in the context of I was getting ready to go to New York City and go to the Met. And there are a bunch of Rothkos there. And she said, okay, have you seen a Rothko in person? I said, I have not. And she said, all right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to just walk up to a Rothko and stand in front of it and just ask yourself, is this stirring anything inside of you? And doggone it, Jonathan, it stirred something inside of me. And for the life of me, I can't tell you what it was. Yeah. There was a green rectangular shape and an orange one underneath it and kind of a brownish black. And I just was like, I wanted to stay and linger over this thing. And the same way with like Jackson Pollock, which is just kind of organized chaos and the paint splatter and all that, but that was like a helpful, she was helping me. I still can't tell you like why I was moved by looking at a Rothko, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, and that's part of the mystery and the power of art. Now, an art critic or art historian would probably be able to opine on that and say, well, I'll tell you exactly why you were moved by,
right. Yeah, right. I don't think we
have to know that, or I think we can say, or that's information that I can accumulate over time. Yeah. But I'm really glad I saw that Rothko, and I'm really not much closer to understanding it than I was then. And that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that reminds me of, something Flannery O'Connor said, and I can't I can't find the exact quotation, but so I'm going to do the best I can here. But she says essentially the mind that's most ready to be affected by fiction is not necessarily the most educated mind, but the mind that's most willing to sort of enter into mystery and to that's open to the possibility that that mystery and that art somehow connects us to mystery. She was talking about fiction specifically, but
yeah,
as you said, the critic's job is to put it into words, to translate experience into language.
Yeah, but I think one of the
go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like one of the mistakes that we make is that the critic's work is kind of the pinnacle of the experience, right? Yeah. Is that the person who then synthesizes it and puts it to language, analyzing it, that's the end of the road. Yeah. That's what you want to be able to get to. And I would say, no, it's not. In fact, I was speaking to a group of college students just earlier this week, and I was talking about, a story that I told them a story about Van Gogh's The Only Painting He Sold. And a student asked me, what would you say is the thesis of your story? And this was a sidebar one-on-one afterwards. And I said, it's a story. I don't have a thesis for that story. I'm telling you a story. Yeah. But that's one of the things that in the West, I think we think that the point of engaging with anything is to get the lesson from it, is to get the application from it. And so it's why we might walk up to a painting or read a poem and think and be frustrated because we don't feel like we got it. Yeah. Like it didn't, what am I supposed to do with this? Well, some of what you're supposed to do with it is let it roll around like marbles in a box in your head, and it was Jesus' primary method of teaching was not, let me tell you 3 things that you need to do. It was, once there was a man who fell who fell among thieves, or there was a woman who had a coin and she lost it. And I think part of the beauty of art is it transcends just the idea that we're mere collectors of data and appliers of lessons, but that we're narrative beings, and we're people who part of the way that we grow and develop as human beings is interacting with the stories and the experiences of others too. Because even though we may not say, I heard the story about this person and here's the 3 things I'm taking away from it and applying it to my life, the depth of the sorrow that a person experiences will soften us to grieve better, or the ambitions of somebody that then kind of turn on them in the end will be a cautionary tale that might humble us in a conversation we're about to go into with somebody where we think we're right and they're wrong. Yeah. And so, I think there's the intangibility and the mystery of story and poetry and art and music, I think give us more than if we were just to say, and here's the 3 things that you should take away from that poem, or the 3 life lessons you should get from this painting, Yeah.
And it occurs to me that sometimes the criticism or a critical approach to art and beauty is one way to protect ourselves from that beauty and to insulate ourselves from it. Yeah. And, you make a point in maybe it's the introduction to your book, that beauty, one thing beauty does is it can show us where we're wrong. Mm-hmm. And I love the example. You've already mentioned Anton Ego, so let's return to Anton Ego from Ratatouille, the food critic there. And I so love the way you talk about Anton Ego and the fact that he comes in as a critic whose job is to judge the food, right? Yep. And then the beauty of the meal breaks through all that, and it
teleports him back. It teleports him back to being the happy child that he was before he became so serious.
Yeah.
And he has a moment of he experiences awe and joy. And that's one of the ways beauty shows us where we're wrong is it has this, it's sneaky, it sneaks up on us. I mean, you and I have talked at length about our trips to the Grand Canyon, right? Yeah. We both have taken family trips out west and done the whole thing. And, you meet people who will say, Grand Canyon, what's the big deal? It's just a big hole in the ground, right? Yeah. When you stand at the rim of the Grand Canyon, beauty shows you where you're wrong, if that's your opinion of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Because while, yes, it's a big hole in the ground, there's also something about the way that the scope and the breadth of what you're seeing makes you small. Yeah. And also makes you wonder at the complexity of what caused something like this, and the power of what must have caused something like this, and the time and all of those things. And that's part of what beauty does. It kind of exposes error when we form impressions without knowledge.
Yeah.
And so, without firsthand experience, we may decide that we just don't like people, a certain group of people, or a certain foreign country, or something like that. I don't ever want to go to that country. But then you go there, and the beauty of a place and the beauty of people and the beauty of flavors and culture will gently rebuke you, in a way that also then draws you deeper into something good. And I think what beauty does is it brings specificity to prejudice.
Yeah.
So I have a general prejudice against something, and encountering the beauty of that thing shows you where your prejudice was just misinformed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put you on the spot. Is there an example of when that's happened to you in your life?
Yeah. There's many. I think the Grand Canyon would be one, but let me think of some others. The Mark Rothko experience would be another one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do.
Can you?
Yes. I would say, just kind of in general, as a young person who was of sort of an analytical frame of mind, and probably not as analytical as I thought. I had just all kinds of opinions about, as you said, people and groups of people, and stories about. I mean, I don't know. I grew up in Georgia, so I thought I was a little suspicious of New York City, for instance, or other northern, northern places, and to actually, go to a place and see the people who are. Turns out they love their children too, even in New York City. And you put it in terms of specificity. When you see specific people, I mean, you've got a category of I don't know. I mean, if you're suspicious of Middle Easterners, if you actually know some Middle Easterners, it's hard to. Those generalities don't last very well.
Elaine Scarry wrote a book called On Beauty and Being Just. And she says it like this. She said, beauty always takes place in the particular. And if there are no particulars, the chances of seeing it go down. And that's what prejudice is. There's a lack of particulars. And so the beauty comes in and starts to show you the particulars. I did think of an example that's very poignant for me. So I'm a pastor. My main job is I'm a pastor of a local church. And I have found over the course of my life for the local church to be one of these kinds of places. That when I was younger, I thought, maybe I'll go to church, maybe I won't. It'll be me and Jesus, and I'll read my Bible. But, and as a pastor, as somebody who's been with the church, one of the things that I know to be true about the church is that it's a place where the Lord picks your friends for you.
Yeah.
Where people walk through the door and they're part of your community if they stick around. Mm-hmm. And if they stick around and they're part of the community, I look around and I think, I don't know any other organization or any other kind of setting in which I would have ever been friends with this person. Mm-hmm. We're nothing alike. We there are things about them that I find odd. There are things about me I'm sure they find odd. Mm-hmm. And yet I spend more time with them in person than I do with my own mother, because I see them every week. And that's been one of those places where I think that the church, when the church is turned into a cartoon, or the church is known for the worst of what Christian people or people in positions of power within the church have done, which are all tragic and horrible. But if the church gets reduced down to just that, there's so much that will be missed in the beauty of the local body of Christ and all of its idiosyncrasies and all of its strangeness. There's also so much good and so much depth of community and so much willingness to humbly walk through life with one another that there's just no other place in the world where it happens quite like that.
Yeah.
And so that's a good example for me of where the beauty of the diversity and the breadth of the body of Christ will show you where you're wrong if you think that churches are just full of one particular kind of hypocrite.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. You speak of a theological responsibility to engage with beauty.
Yeah.
What do you tell me about that?
Well,
why is this a responsibility to engage in beauty and not just a bonus, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because what are the things that we know to be true about God, right? If we're in a pursuit of, if theology is a pursuit of knowing ourselves and knowing God, knowing ourselves in light of who God is, what are some of the things that we know about him? A lot of what we know about him has to do with his glory and has to do with his handiwork, right? And so we read passages of scripture where God shows up in some sort of visual form in a burning bush, or in the Transfiguration, or and in every case. There's a radiance that's too much to behold, and there's a power and a majesty that is overwhelming to the people who are experiencing that. It's glory, right? And then we just look at the world that he has made, and it is filled with beauty, and it's filled with God could have made things work any number of ways, right? But he made things, he made a setting sun a beautiful thing. He made flowers. He made, there's so many things that he created that are beautiful that maybe didn't have to be, but they are. And that's a reflection of him. And I think if we're trying to understand who God is and who we are in light of who he is, and dealing with matters of beauty and majesty are not part of that process, we're going to get a very two-dimensional view of God that's going to be probably primarily concerned with our behavior, but not necessarily somebody that we would want to fall down in front of and worship. Somebody we would say, I'm going to worship because he told me I have to. But there's so much, Rich Mullins said it, so much beauty around us for just two eyes to see. And everywhere I go, I'm looking. That's part of the theological responsibility of somebody who believes in a majestic God who created the beauty of the world that we live in. That it is that it is an exercise in coming to know God better to stand on the north rim of the Grand Canyon and see it. And so that's why I think it's not just a bonus, but we're doing it wrong if beauty isn't part of a fundamental understanding of who he is.
Yeah. To live in a world that was made for joy and not feel joy is to.
Yeah. I mean, it's Genesis 1, right? Like the Lord makes the heavens and the earth. He makes the plants. He makes the animals. And what does he say after all of it? It was good.
Yeah.
It was good. And I just think, okay, what must what must it mean for God to say something is good? Like how good must it have to be?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, it's, as parents, we look at a drawing that our kid, that a 7-year-old makes, and we tell them that's great. It's great for a 7-year-old, and it's also a great opportunity to fill their tank a little bit with encouragement, but it's probably not going to be in the Louvre, how much wider must the chasm be between us telling a 7-year-old that their drawing is good and God looking at the world that he made and saying, that's good.
Yeah.
That's,
you talk about the idea, and I think it's so important that beauty attracts.
Yes.
Right. And so, truth, goodness, beauty, the three transcendentals, without putting down truth or goodness, both of which are exceedingly important. But it seems to me that truth and goodness, those are things that we pursue, and beauty pursues us. And beauty, even if I'm resistant, and there are plenty of times when I'm resistant to truth and beauty, truth and goodness. Sometimes I'm also resistant to beauty, and beauty, I think you've used the word in this conversation already, sneaks up on you, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just don't. A person that is resistant to the truth can still get snuck up on by beauty. I'm not saying that the truth can't sneak up on you too, because it can, and goodness can sneak up on you.
No, I mean, we've all had the experience of beauty doing that. It's the double take, right? It's the I have to see that again. I remember the first time I saw my wife, I had to do a double take, and it was her beauty. It struck me, and what does that led to? It led to a longer process than I would have wanted in getting her to go on a date with me. But now we're 28 years in, 27 of those as husband and wife. We've or however many now. We have 5 children and vocations that we've fallen together. But my story is as old as time. It's like other people's story that beauty attracts us, but then it's an invitation to step into something more deeply, and to venture into something. And we do it. I mean, we human beings, we use our vacation days, and we drive to certain places just so we can see a sunrise, and there's something about that experience that's us basically doing the same thing as Moses and David, hungering in some very real way to see the glory of God. And it's drawing us in to put us in a place where our defenses are down and our posture is receptive. I think that's, and hopefully with the book, not to circle back to the book, but that's part of what my goal was for the book, was to tell beautiful stories. And by beautiful, I don't mean all happy. Like there's some of the stories in the book, there's no hagiography here. Like if I'm going to tell you about a painter whose life was a hot mess and were probably insufferable people, that's what you're going to read about. There's some chapters in there where the chapter on Caravaggio.
I was just thinking about Caravaggio. You said a lot of what we know about his life is from police reports.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's mostly what we know. I mean, there was one great. Caravaggio is the guy who gave us the incredulity of St. Thomas, that beautiful, poignant picture where Jesus is putting Thomas's finger into the wound in his own side, and it's crazy. But he was a guy who a friend of his said Caravaggio only knew Carnival and Lent.
Wow.
Those were the only. There was nothing in the middle, and he was either painting alone these transcendent, beautifully, biblically poignant paintings, or he was using the money that he got from those paintings to go on week or month-long benders where he would stab and murder people. And like, no hyperbole there. That's what he would do. And he's a riddle, Yeah. But that story is there's beauty in that story, because it's a kind of an extreme example of the thing that I think all of us experience, and that is inside of me. There are things that are sacred, and there are things that are profane. And there's Carnival and Lent both happening inside all of us at any given moment, and we are these paradoxes of sanctity and debauchery, and Caravaggio's life is just, legacy is a pretty extreme and tragically sad example of that. That was a fascinating thing. You know how that chapter came about?
Tell me.
I loved the painting, The Incredulity of St. Thomas. And I was like, I want to write a chapter about that painting.
Okay.
And so that was the start. And so I started reading about the painting, and then I started learning about Caravaggio. And then the more I was like, oh, this can't be a story about that painting. That painting is a footnote in the story behind how the painting, why the painting is so poignant, And so, but it's just those little sparks of wanting to kind of follow the thread of a story that as anybody is engaging, reading the plaque on the wall beside a piece of art, and you see something that intrigues you, make a note of it and then Google it later. You'll be amazed at the rabbit trails you will find yourself going down, and the things that you will uncover that are just kind of mesmerizing and fascinating.
Yeah. I have to say, I didn't know. I mean, this book is an invitation. This is an attractive book. It attracts me to something I didn't know. I was interested in Caravaggio. I didn't know, I was interested in art. I mean, I have known because I've been hearing your talks for these last few years. But you have opened up a world to me in these chapters, and so you say, you talk about these stories being beautiful. They really are beautiful. You've written something beautiful here, and I'm really proud of you. I'm proud to know you.
Thanks, man. And I'm really glad that's been your response, because that's what my hope is for this particular book, is that it is an invitation for people to say, man, that was, the second chapter is on Michelangelo's David, and
great chapter.
It is that story is just such I'm not boasting in what I wrote, but the story of Michelangelo's David is like a heartbreakingly beautiful and complex thing.
It is.
So that was the hope. And so I'm really glad that has been your response, is that it's been an invitation to go deeper in. I think,
as much as I love books that are about things I already love, what I just love books that make me love something I didn't know I was going to love. And that's what this book does.
When we engage with art, one of the things that I mention in my chapter on Van Gogh's Red Vineyard is that when you walk up to a painting that you've never seen before, that painting belongs to the world. But if it's a painting that you connect with on some level, by the time you walk away from it, it's become part of your personal collection. And we all have this, right? We all have sort of personal collections of music and literature, but we also do this with art. And one of the things that I think I can promise with this book is I'll add at least 9 works to your personal collection, things that you will feel belong to you in a very real way, things that you'll say, I know something about that, or there'll be an air of familiarity when you see it, where you'll feel like when you go to a party and you're not sure, you don't know anybody there, and you see somebody across the room. I've been to parties at your house, Jonathan, where it's been that way, I've gotten there and I'm looking for I don't know most of the people here.
Yeah.
Oh, there's somebody I know. That's where I'm going. I'm going to go right over there now.
But also, the first time you came to the Christmas party at my house, you hid in the bathroom for a long time.
Panic room. Bathrooms are great panic. I mean, it's a pro tip for introverts, right? Is that, a bathroom is a good place to just kind of go into, lock the door, and just kind of stand there for a minute.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I was completely healthy that day. I was just, getting what I needed for the introvert who was redlining.
Well, Russ Ramsey, thanks so much for being here. And I hope a lot of people read this book because it sure did me a lot of good.
Man, thank you so much. It's good to talk to you.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. To check out more of our podcasts, visit rabbitroom.com/podcast. Our work at The Rabbit Room would be impossible without the generous support of our membership. If you'd like to learn more about membership at The Rabbit Room, visit rabbitroom.com/member. And thanks for listening.
The Habit Membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.